Hello everyone! You may have heard the sad news that the oldest Grandmaster, the legendary Yuri Averbakh, died at the canonical age of 100. I'm going to show you how the young Yuri fell madly in love with chess. I promise you that this video will not only make you progress, but also dazzle you. We'll do some artistic and instructive chess, and also a bit of history. The year is 1935. Salo Floor just won the second Moscow International Tournament in front of Mikhail Botvinnik, Emmanuel Lasker, and José Raúl Capablanca. The late Yuri Averbakh is 13 years old. He knows the rules of chess, but is not an enthusiast yet. A lecture by Nikolai Grigoriev is about to give birth to a love for chess that will dictate each day of the 87 years that Averbakh has left to live. Here's what Yuri said about this budding love in his book Selected Games. Late in 1935, I visited the Moscow Chess Club for the first time, and there I was fortunate enough to listen to a lecture by the great endgame expert Nikolai Grigoriev. It made an indelible impression on me. When Grigoriev explained his pawn studies, moving the pieces on the demonstration board with his thin, artistic fingers, I sensed, rather than understood, the great depth and beauty of chess, observing with my own eyes how human thought spiritualizes these little wooden pieces, and they, like real actors, begin performing miraculous spectacles capable of touching the most sensitive parts of the human soul. It was this perception of chess as an art that finally linked me with it. I wanted to understand chess and study it. So, if the menu suits you, let's go with this position. It is white to play and win. And at first sight, it seems that you have two choices, yes? Either king to d7 to run towards the b5 pawn, or king f7 to run towards the h5 pawn. But both of them are bad. Because for instance, if you go to d7 and towards the b5 pawn, black will go to the opposite direction and go towards the pawn on h4. And we can see that both kings take the pawns. And here, okay, you don't want to play king to c6 because then the pawn will promote an h1 with a check. So you play, for instance, king to c5. And they do the same, they don't go to g3 because then the pawn will promote with check. They go, for instance, to g4. And it will be just a dead draw because both players will promote on the same move. And it's queen versus queen, it's a draw. So, what you want to do is to play king to e7. Taking what we call the distant opposition. Both kings are on the same file, here the E file, separated by an odd number of squares, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 squares. And the clever idea is to wait for black to take one direction, for instance, let's say they play king to d2, and then go towards the same direction, because here we'll play king to d6, and after king to c3, king to c5 not only attacks the pawn on b5 but also defends the pawn on b4, and so it's game over. So black has to wait with king to e2, but we keep on taking the opposition on the e file, waiting for black to move. King to e3, and here king to e5, and now the distant opposition just transformed into a direct opposition. Black has to wait still on the e file, king to e2, king to e4, king to e1, king to e3, and now it's all over. Black has to take a direction, let's say king to f1, and we play king to e4, king to g2, king to g5, and it's game over. King to f3, we take the pawn, and here we play king to g6, and we just promote. Okay, that was the first study. Let's switch to the second one. This one. It's white to move, and I will not tell you just yet what they have to do, because at first sight it seems that white should be winning. Our king is closer to the pawns, so let's try and win the pawn with something like this, and take it and promote and win the game. So king to g5, king to b2, king to f5, king to b3, king to e6, king to b4, king to d6, king to b5, and we play king to c7. But after king to a6, we reach a very famous Tuk song called Trebuchet. The player who is to move loses the game. Here, unfortunately, it's white to move, and so black wins. For instance, king to d6, black just takes the pawn, play king to a5, and it's game over. So, okay, let's go back, and now that we understood that we should just try to draw the game, we have to grieve the loss of the b6 pawn. Black will take it sooner or later. It is a fact that we must accept. But when they will play king takes b6, if we just answer king to b4, taking the opposition, then it's a theoretical draw. So this is just what we have to do. Wait for king to b6 to play king to b4, and it's a dead draw. So let's try. King to g4, king to b2, king to f4, king to b3, king to e4, king to b4, king to d4, king to b5, king to c3. They take and we play king to b4. It's a dead draw. Is it that simple? No, of course not. Because after king to g4, which is a blunder, black plays the clever move king to c2, and after king to f4 they play king to d3. This technique is called shouldering. And yeah, white king cannot go towards the b6, the b4 square, sorry. For instance, king to e5, king to c4, king to d6, king to b5, it's the same as we just saw, king to c7, king to a6, reaching the trebuchet position. And if we play king to f3, it's a move that really spend not going towards the b4 square. And after king to c4, king to e4, king to b5, king to d4, king takes b6, we are too late, and after king to c4 they play king to a5, and the black's king reaches a key square, and they are winning. So it's actually more difficult than anticipated. What we have to understand is that the shortest distance between two squares for a king is not always a straight line. It takes the same number of moves to go from h4 to b4 in a straight line, or like this. And we play the clever move king to g3. The idea is to prevent black's king from the shouldering that we just saw. And after king to c2, king to f2, king to d3, king to e1, we see that we prevented this shouldering. And after king to c4, king to d2, king to b5, king to c3, king takes b6, we play king to b4, reaching this very easy theoretical draw. So let's switch to the third position, third study, why to play and win, which is rather difficult at first sight, because g4, b5, g5, b4, g6, b3 check, king to c3, b2, g7, b1, queen. Black queens first, but we queen with check. But they play king to a1, and after, let's say, queen to a8, queen a2, queen to h1, queen to b1, we see that this is just a dead draw. So, if not g4, what can we do? Maybe king to c3, with idea b5, king to b4, and we take the pawn, and we win. But here, black plays, of course, king to a3, and we can play king to c4, but they do the same, king to a4, and after g4, b5, it's not obvious what to do. For instance, king to c3, threatening king to b2. Before we would lose after king to b2, and we just promote the pawn. But black plays king to a3, and it's a draw. g5, b4, we play king to c2, threatening king to b1. They play king to a2, g6, b3 with check, and it's exactly the same position as we just saw. b1, queen, queen with check, but it's too late, it's a draw. So the very creative idea is in this position we just play g4 and black plays b5. We don't go to c3 but to d3. Why? Because we want to play king c2 only after the pawn is on b2. Because if we play king c2 too early, b3 will come with check and we'll have to move our king away from c2. So we wait for b3, b2 to be played, and only after we play king to c2. So king d3, b4 loses because then king c2 and king b1 wins. So black has to play king to a3, g5, b4, g6, b3, g7, b2, and only now do we play king to c2, forcing king to a2. But now we promote with check, and it's actually mate on the next move. King to a3, queen b3, or king a1, queen to a8. Okay, that was fun, I hope. Now this position, white to play and win. It's actually the position after the first move of the study, but I thought it was prettier presented this way. So white to play and win. And in a blitz game, like every grandmaster, at least every grandmaster who doesn't know this study, would play king to f7 instantly. Like, what else? But it's a dead draw now, because black plays g5, and after hg, h4, g6, h3, g7, h2, g8, queen, h1, queen, we see that the king on f7 is very badly placed because g8 queen didn't go with a check, and it's now a dead draw. So now that we got this idea, we can find the clever move king to f8. Now g5 would just lose because we promote with a check and it's game over. But black has this nice defensive move g6, and if we play king to f7 now, g5, and it is the same position just with an extra tempo for each player. So maybe king to g7, but then the king is also badly placed because here we cannot play g7. So the solution is the incredible switchback. We just played king to f8, and after g6 we go back king to e7. So this is incredible because like in 2 moves we basically just passed, while black play a pawn forward and has an extra tempo. But this is actually why they are lost, because now we threaten king to f6. If only black could play g6 to back to g7, then it should be a draw, but they cannot. So it's a dead lost position. g5 we just take and promote with a check. So they should try at least to go towards f7, because we have only one pawn and it's an h pawn. So if the king which is f7, it will be a draw. But like in all the good movies, white's heroic king prevents on the last second the king to reach the drawing error, and we just promote the pawn. Okay, next position, next study, this one, white to play and win. So black has a very simple idea. They want to promote the d pawn on d1 in 5 moves, and it will be with check. So if we play like h4, they just play d5, and we'll play h8 queen, they will play d1 queen check. And we cannot just take the pawn, because then d5 and it's the same story. If we push, they will promote first and with a check. And if we try to run, they can also use their king to ensure the pawn promotion. So here we will be lost even. So there is only one idea. It's to play f4, because we threaten to also promote with a check. So now d5 would simply lose, because we play f5, and when they will play d2, we'll play f8, queen, check. So what can black do? Only one move, king to b4, entering the square of the pawn. So now if we play f5, it's stupid, because they will just win the pawn, and we would be dead lost. So don't do that. But what can we do? Well, only one idea. It's to play h4. It's not yet clear what we want to achieve, but we have to. There is no other solution. And here black has two ideas. Either play a5 to promote this pawn, or play d5 to promote this one. If they play a5, they will promote with check. There is only one small problem. After h8, queen, a1, queen, check, we can play queen takes queen. So they cannot play a5, they have to play d5. Now, if we play h5, they will play d4, and they will promote with check. So it will be at least a draw for black. So we have to play a5 to threaten to promote with check. It's the same story once more. Once again, king to c5 is forced to enter the newly created square. Now if we play f6, king d6, and so on, we lose. So we play h5. They have to play g4, and we play f6. Now the square is here. Black plays king to d6, and we play h6, and they play d3, and we play f7, and they play king e7, and we play h7, and they play d2. And now we finally understand what was all this scheme about, to play f8 with the check, forcing king takes f8, and now h8 comes with a check too, and it's game over. So very quickly, why to play and win? Only winning solution, this one. Quite funny, yeah? Okay, this is another very beautiful and simple, in the sense, study why to play and win. Obviously, white is up a pawn. And yeah, before would just be an instant draw, because then black plays king to a6, taking the opposition, and if you play king to b8, king to b6, and black's king will just follow white, and white cannot play c4 at any moment, otherwise I will lose even. So yeah, it's not before. But what can we do? Maybe king to b8? Nope, because then black plays b4, and after cb4, king to b5, it's a dead draw. But if you play c4, then we even lose, so don't do that, because b3, and then black's king takes both pawns and wins the game. So only move b3. And now black has this clever move, clever idea, king to a5. Here the most natural move is to play king to b7, but it's a draw, it's a blunder, because after b4, c4, it is stalemate. So king to b7 or king to a7 leads to stalemate. So king to b8 is forced. Now black plays b4, and after c4, king to b6, taking the opposition. And it seems it's a draw, because if we move the king, black will simply follow us, and we cannot really play c5, because black would simply win the pawn, and then we might even lose the game. So yeah, it seems it's a dead draw, but there is a trick. We go into c8, then king to d8, then king to e8, then king to f8, then king to g8, and then king to h8, and black cannot play king to h6 because then they would leave the square of the pawn, and now c5 wins. So they have to lose this direct opposition on the file, but they can take it diagonally. And after king to h7, they take the direct opposition on the 7th rank, and we play king to h6, and they play king to f6, and it's the same story. Black keeps on having the opposition. But we play king to h5, king to f5, king to h4, king to f4, and after king to h3, we see that black cannot play king to f3 because then the king would leave the square of the pawn, and we can push c5 and win the game. So they have to take the diagonal opposition with king to f5, and after king to g3, transform it once more into direct opposition on the file, and after king to f3, king to f5, king to e3, king to e5, finally after king to d3, finally at last, black can no longer take the opposition, and it is game over, as after king to d6, we play king to d4, king to c6, c5, and we will sooner or later win the b4 pawn. For instance, king to b5, king to d5, and then king to c4, king takes b4, and it's game over. Wow, what a journey it was. b3, and here this very long trip just to take the opposition. Yeah, so our king did all this journey just to take the opposition. What an amazing study, yeah? Okay, next one. White to play and win, and the first move is quite natural. It's g4, fixing the weakness on h6. Now, the most obvious line, first line that one should calculate, is king to b3, very natural move, king to b5, also natural, king to c3, king to c5, king to d3, king to d5, king to e3, king to e5, king to f3, king to f5, and here we can understand that this is a Zugzwang. Black to move loses, because okay, they don't want to play king to g2, then king to g6, and black can no longer take on g4. We will come back to this position later. But white to move, if they play king to g6 or king anywhere else, they lose the pawn. They lose the pawn, and if they play h3, then king to g3 and king takes h3. So this is a Zugzwang, and we can understand that every intermediate position, for instance this one or this one, are also Zugzwang. That's Zugzwang all the way. So black should not take king to b3, because then after king to b5 they are the one in Zugzwang. So they should try and be clever and play king to a3. Now if white plays king to b5, it's a blunder, because then king to b3, and it's white to move in the Zugzwang position. So after king to a3, white has to be clever and play king to a5. And now king to b3, king to b5 would lead to the same Zugzwang position with black to move, so everything is perfect for white, but black can be clever and play king to b2. And here, king to b4 is a mistake, because after king to c2, king to c4, everything seems fine, but here black plays king to f2, and white cannot play king to f4. They have to play king to f5, and after king to f3, white is in Zugzwang. So after king to b2, only move is king to b6, taking not the direct opposition but the distant opposition. Here black plays king to b3, and white has to play king to b5, and we can repeat the same maneuver. King to c2, king to c6, king to c3, king to c5, king to d2, king to d6, king to d3, king to d5, king to e2, king to e6, king e3, king e5, king f2, king f6, king f3, king to f5. Black is in Zugzwang. So I told you remember that we would come back to this position, and we did, but it took us quite a journey to go back to this position. It took us longer than expected. Okay, now it's black to move, which is good for white. King to g2, they play king to g6, and here, okay, king takes h2 would lose after king takes h6, but black can play the clever move king to h3. And now this would be a draw, but white has a final choke song, king to h5, and now it's all over. Black has to take, and white simply win both pawns, and it's game over. So yeah, it was amazing, like this incredible and mesmerizing dance of the kings. Yeah, another one. Okay, this one is white to play and win, and it is incredibly difficult. It is Boris Spassky's favorite study, since he had solved it in 1961 when he was young and had just changed his trainer from Alexander Tolush to Igor Bondarevsky. And young Boris had to solve this study, given by him by his new trainer, and he sat there in silence, watching at the board for 20 minutes, at the end of which he broke the silence by saying the last move, the final move of the solution, queen to g2. And since then it is his favorite study. He had showed it to many friends, Bobby Fischer included, and Bobby had much trouble to solve it. Actually, he waited for one whole day, then called Boris Spassky on the phone, said only queen to g2, and hung up. What is this queen g2 about? We will soon see. First, let's understand that if we simply push a4, we will promote with check, which is a good news, but there is a bad news. It is that black has a c pawn, and as you probably know, it is a theoretical draw. Okay, so if not a4, what can we do? Well, queen to f5, and at first it seems easy. Black plays if black plays c5, then king to e5, and we win the pawn and we will promote. So black plays king to e3, but we play king to e5, and if king d3, king d5, king c3, king c5, and it's all over. King b2, a4, and yeah, black can resign. So the problem is that after king to e5, black plays the clever move c6, taking away the d5 square from white's king. So we play a4, and now king to d3, and after a5, only now black plays c5. So there is no point in king d5 because c4. So we play a6, c4, a3, a7, c3, a8, queen, c2, and it looks like a draw, but white's king got just a bit closer. But white has to be very, very precise, because if black kings which is this corner, then it will be that draw. For instance, a very tempting move is queen to e4, but it is a mistake. Why? Not because of king to c3, because here queen d4 wins, king b3, queen to a1, and queen to c1 next, and game over. But here black has king to d2. If we give a check, king to e2, we play queen to c3, king d1, queen d3 check, king to c1. Black had to put the king to c1, so white is able to bring the king even closer, but it's not close enough, because after king b2 there is this clever try, queen to e2, but here only one move draws. It's not king b1 which loses, so in a practical game queen e2 is a very clever try. King b1 loses after king to c3, c1 queen, king b3, and it's game over. White will checkmate on the next move or in a few moves. So it's not king b1, here it's king to a1. And this is the reason why black draws with a c-pawn, because after queen takes c2, it is stalemate. So yeah, this queen to e4 here, very tempting move, but if you calculate properly, as young Boris Spassky did, you understand that it is only a draw. And the solution is to play queen to d5. And here, king c3, queen d4, queen to a1 next is the same win. King to e2, sorry, king to e2 loses after queen to a2, king to d1, and here king d4, c1 queen, king d3, and it's game over. But black has a more precise move, king to e3, which is very clever. After queen e4, let's say king d2, it is the same draw as we just saw. So what can white do? Well, you know the final move, it is queen to g2, double exclam, letting c1 queen, but queen g5 would win the newly promoted queen. And yeah, if king d3, then we play queen g5 anyway, and queen to c1 next, it's game over. Yeah, very difficult study, incredibly difficult study, with only 1 pawn for each player. It's incredible, and it shows Boris Spassky's talent, but also, and maybe more importantly even, Nikolai Grigoriev as a genius. So this was the selection of studies that I made just after learning the sad news of Averbach's passing. And I did not include many brilliant studies, many masterpieces. For instance, this one I did not include because I thought, yeah, it's not really game-like, you know. You see that there are these 3 pawns, and it can only happen in a study, right? Not in a real game. A few hours later, on the same day as I did this selection, the day that Yuri Averbakh died, May the 7th, Levan Aronian and Alireza Firouzja were playing, and what was my surprise when they reached this position. Levan just played h4. It's almost the same, as you can see. And I knew this was a zugzwang. It's white just played king to b2, reaching this position with black to move, and black is in zugzwang. If they play a pawn, then they lose it. And if they play king h7, then g6, f takes g6, and now e6. And after king g7, h6, and white wins. So I was like, okay, maybe this is a zugzwang too. And it turns out it is. And I was proud of being probably the 3rd person in the world to understand that this was a zugzwang. The first 2 being, of course, first Levan and then Alireza. So yeah, if you doubted of the practical value of studies, then I hope this changes your mind. Anyway, back to 1935. The newly chess lover Yuri Averbakh will turn to be Grandmaster, USSR champion, second of world champions in many world championship match. He became also an arbiter for world championship match, including Kasparov Kramnik. He became, of course, a very popular author of chess books, a very devoted theoretician, endgame specialist, and also study composer, just like his mentor Nikolai Grigoriev. Unfortunately for chess, Grigoriev did not have this incredible longevity. He died at a very young age of 43. from a cancer which was aggravated by the torture that he had been a victim from the NKVD, the Soviet secret police. So a sad end to a great genius. Fortunately for us, we still have his studies which are truly immortal. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please press the like button and see you soon. Ciao!